Hello, and welcome to the HLS graduate sort of chats. Today, we're joined by Charlotte. And Charlotte, do you want to give us a little bit of background about who you are and where you're at right now?
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte. I recently graduated last year from the Sport and Exercise Science undergraduate degree. I'm now studying a Masters in Psychology at Coventry as well, and I'm hoping to go on to further study and do a PhD, either at Coventry or elsewhere, depending on the situations.
That's perfect. So it seems a bit of a, in my mind, a bit of a switch of degrees is going from sport and exercise science to psychology. Was that something that you planned all along?
No, originally when I came to, about 5 years ago now, when I came to Coventry, I was sort of thinking sports science, PGCE, PE teacher route. And then I sort of really enjoyed getting involved in the research and stuff at the uni. And then the sort of psychology side, I guess, developed sort of naturally as it went along. I was looking at routes, I guess, post-COVID of what would be viable for sort of a HLS graduate in this situation. I didn't really want to risk going into, I guess, a job or a graduate scheme, etc., that I wouldn't be fully into. And I found the Masters in Psychology course, and it all looked really interesting. It's sort of a challenge for me because it's not obviously my background. There's no sports element to it at all, which always sort of throws people off when they ask me about my Masters. And I just sort of read about the course and I was like, let's give it a try. And I think for my future development, I guess going into a PhD, it doesn't really matter so much how specific your Masters is. It's sort of the fact that you can be a Master's student and get involved in that sort of high level work. So that kind of sold me to the course, I guess.
That's brilliant. And it sounds like you made that sort of decision, I'm going to guess at some point in your degree to switch from sort of like I don't want to call it practical PE, but becoming a PE teacher to sort of more the theory and the psychology behind it kind of thing. Where do you know roughly where you're at in your degree, or where you were when you decided to make that change?
I think it was quite early on, so I decided to majority of the sport and exercise science lecturers are sort of involved in a lot of research, and a lot of it is based in primary school, sort of developing and leading interventions. So originally I was like, okay, I'll get loads of experience in that because I want to go on to a PGC and it'll be good experience for my CV, etc. And we went in and I had a great time. Don't get me wrong, I was like, yes, I love it. I love working with kids, etc. But I wasn't like, I want to teach, I want to be in this school and be the teacher. It was more so I want to do the job that my lecturers are doing, where they're coming in and delivering it and developing it and sort of testing the theory out behind it. So it was probably like midway through first year, maybe even earlier. It was quite early on. I knew that sort of school teaching wasn't for me, but I've always enjoyed the education side of things. So I think the route of going Masters, PhD, sort of becoming a lecturer was the route I kind of knew I had to go down to get to that end success, I guess, of maybe becoming a lecturer, either in sports science or psychology or wherever sort of the route takes me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like, by the sounds of it, part and part of being HLS, I think, is a lot of the practical elements that come with it. During your third year, which was just last year, obviously you guys were the first sort of year that were affected by the pandemic. Did you find it quite difficult moving into a sort of entirely theoretical sort of end of year assessments? How was that transition for you?
I think in a lot of ways I was fortunate because my dissertation was based on sort of questionnaires, so I could sort of still data collect and transition that quite easily. But then a lot of aspects where it was coming in and doing our practical labs, sort of applying what we'd learned in lectures, because we didn't have that anymore. I think that was difficult for me, especially not just the nature of the course, but I think the way that a lot of us on our course learn. We're very hands-on. We like to be able to go, okay, we'll sit for 2 hours in this lecture, but here's a 2-hour lab. How can we apply it? And I think the fact that wasn't there anymore, and we'd already done it for like 3-4 years, we were all sort of like, this is very alien, what's going on. I think there was elements to it that were sort of positive in a way. I think it sort of taught me a lot of resilience, and it's something that like I would recommend to people to mention when they're applying for like jobs and stuff like that, because if there's ever a perfect opportunity to sort of prove that you can sort of keep going no matter what, you've gone through a global pandemic and sort of finished a degree. I would sort of take my hat off to a lot of the sport and exercise science staff, because they were constantly checking in with us, trying to have I had more regular Teams meetings with like my dissertation supervisor and stuff like that than we might have had previously. Purely, a lot of them were to just check in on us, check on our mental well-being and stuff like that, because a lot of us were sort of isolated with not many people around us. I think, yeah, it was very strange. I also graduated on Zoom, which isn't the best experience, I guess, after I've done 4 years. But it sort of didn't take away from the achievement. I think it took me a while to realise that, like, yeah, the graduation is an important factor of sort of university, but I've still got the degree and I've still got that element to it. And I think that would be my advice as well to students, is don't let sort of COVID or any sort of circumstance take away from what you've achieved, because regardless of pandemic or not, you've got this degree. Yeah, you might be able to celebrate with friends, but you can do that later on. Your celebrations can always come later on, but the fact that you've achieved it is something to celebrate within itself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so often we hear about students having sort of like an anticlimactic feeling when it comes to graduation, because you sort of think maybe at the end of 3 years or 4 years as an undergrad, on your graduation day, you know, that's it, you're absolutely ready for the big wide world kind of thing. And it's fixation on that day in particular that becomes reality. But I think you're a great testament to how experience at university can change your path. After you finished your undergrad, was there any sort of doubt in your mind that you wanted to do a master's? And how did you speak to anyone about studying a master's, or did you just knew that's it, master's it, and then PhD, that's me, and then I'll figure it out from there kind of thing?
So pre-pandemic happening, I'd applied for a couple of PhDs to sort of go directly into it. So I was sort of runner-up for one PhD at Reading, and sort of the reason they gave behind that was because I didn't have a master's, and the person that was sort of against me, I guess, had a master's. So I sort of already had that in the back of my mind, thinking, okay, I am capable of this. It's just sort of one piece of, I guess, red tape that was stopping me. The pandemic, I guess, like a lot of students, did affect my mental well-being a lot. Like, I struggle with sort of mental health issues and stuff anyway. So I think that sort of made it not a lot worse, but it did make a lot of situations more difficult. There's a lot more self-doubt, I guess, that creeps in when you're sat in a room sort of with you or maybe another person by yourself, instead of being in a group where you've got the staff regularly sort of and your course mates regularly going, oh no, you're doing great. I did choose to defer my dissertation and sort of another piece of coursework just for the August time, purely because I think one of the things I really struggled with was sort of managing my time and managing that self-doubt and stress in my last semester of uni. Because I was so used to, I guess, that regimented schedule of, okay, I'm going to go in this many days a week. If I'm not in, then I'm probably going to go in anyway and do work with my friends and stuff. And we all sort of pushed each other to achieve it. And I guess, like, we still had that support network, but it's a lot different when you've got somebody sat next to you going, have you done this? Have you done this yet? Have you started this? Compared to how it was now, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think that made me doubt myself a little bit when it came to my master's, purely because I didn't really have a summer off. So there was that period of, I've got to wait till the end of August, September time to get my results to know if I've got onto my master's. So I had that self-doubt and sort of imposter syndrome situation going on, whereas I had all of these constant, like, my staff, my friends and stuff going, you'll be fine, like, you'll get in, like, you've done great, all you've got to do is like pass this and you've got this. And like, I ended up graduating with a first, so clearly I should have just shut myself up. But it's understandable, I guess, that if you're sat especially when I moved back home. So I lived away at uni at first, and that sort of impacted me, I think, a lot more because I was more isolated, because I had this constant reminder, I guess, of being in Coventry when everything was completely shut down, to then coming home, and I felt a bit more supported, and I think that boosted me a little bit and helped me get my work done. But then sometimes it's harder being in this environment because people don't understand, I guess, because I've got no family that went to university. Whereas I think if I was when I'm surrounded by sort of people that are studying or have studied, you can sort of share those experiences. But yeah, I think in general, I think COVID has taught me a lot and has impacted sort of my route and what I would have chosen, because I probably wouldn't have even thought about doing that master's beforehand. I was sort of looking, because of originally I was going to leave Coventry just so I could sort of push myself a bit more, I guess, because I wanted to get that varied experience and stuff like that. But then I thought, with the pandemic and stuff, if I wanted to stay on and do a master's, I thought the safest bet, and also one that I can rely on, is to stay at Coventry. So I started looking at the master's programs and stuff, and sort of the funding behind it as well, because of having like the initiatives to sort of the alumni discount and stuff like that, that I was like drawn to that. And then the course itself was interesting as well, so that sort of sold me.
Always helpful, that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, like, because usually you could be like, oh yeah, I've got my master's loan, I can just spread my wings and go like up to Liverpool or something like that. But for me, I was like, okay, this probably isn't the time to take enormous risks when nobody is in control of the situation. And to be honest, I'm so glad I stayed. I think this year's sort of taught me a lot about myself and challenged me in ways I didn't think it was going to challenge me. So
yeah. I've got two questions from that, and I just want to say thank you for sharing so much so far. The first is the sort of jump from undergrad to masters. At Coventry, you were an undergrad, now you're a master's student at Coventry. Who did you speak to, and what kind of help did you look for? Did you look at the university for help? Was there anyone in HLS that helped you jump into that master's? And the second question was going to be about how you found it starting a new course during the pandemic, and any advice you might have, especially with the masters. I'm assuming it's going to be a smaller classroom size. Any advice for students who are going to be either coming back next September or starting next September, and using your undergrad and your masters as an experience of, like you saying, you had a lot of friends who were supporting you and you were pushing each other. What kind of advice you might have for them, especially in HLS? Yeah. So a lot of questions there, but yeah.
No, it's good. I think regarding sort of my next choices, I did speak to a lot of my sort of undergraduate lecturers and stuff like that, and also my fellow course mates, to see what they're doing, what they suggested. And also a lot of it was to do with, I guess, going back to that sort of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, just having that reassurance that they thought I was capable of doing it, and pushing me in that direction, because sometimes you don't want to be pushed, but you need to. And I think a lot of the time it was like, I don't think I'm good enough to do a master's, etc. And it was like, no, you are. Like, stop being daft. I think in particular, sort of, a couple of my sports science lecturers were really supportive. They sort of knew about my mental health and stuff, and they knew about my journey, and they'd always recognise that, and they'd be like, okay, you've come this far. What is there that's sort of stopping you from carrying on? There's like, you've been through all of this and you're finishing your degree in a global pandemic. What else like really is going to stop you, I guess, in your masters? But also, I guess, pre-COVID, I was sort of going to sort of the now talent team, so the employability support for HLS. I went to see Ewan, spoke to Julia as well, and they were really good. They sort of, they gave me some advice, which is always useful, but again, going back to that sort of imposter syndrome and stuff, they were like, this is all the stuff we would usually recommend students to do, and you've done it. So like, don't keep putting yourself down, because I found that I'd usually go into meetings and I'd be like, well, I could probably do more of this and this. And they'd be like, well, what have you done? And I'd list it all, and they'd be like, yeah, you're doing great. You don't need to do any more. So I think that was really helpful. And they sort of it's knowing that I can go back to them whenever I need them as well. So I think a lot of the time it's having that safety blanket, I guess, and that support network. And I know I can speak for a lot of students on my course that graduated that know that they still can go back to the staff that taught them, and like people obviously still reach out for like references and stuff. A lot of people are on masters, and are still sort of talking to a lot of the staff that taught them at undergraduate. So I think that was helpful. I think it was the support network I had on sports science was amazing, but I knew that when I was going on to psychology, it was going to be completely different. It was a completely different course team, a different school in the faculty. So there was that sort of apprehension there. One of the things that was sort of helpful for us is one of the girls in the course made a WhatsApp group chat, and sort of everyone on the course, which I think there's about 50 to 60 of us, I'm not quite sure the numbers, we're all sort of in this WhatsApp group chat, and from the start we were like, oh hi, la 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 la. And obviously at the start of the year the restrictions were eased a little bit, so we were in 5 hours a week, which I think really helped, because you can obviously bond with people a lot more when you see them in person. So fortunately we could kind of make those bonds and sort of got a lot of different dynamic relationships and close friends with these students on my course, which have then supported me for the rest of the year, because we haven't been in since last semester. But it's constantly WhatsApp group chat. If there's a deadline due, it's like everyone's reaching out, like how's everyone getting on, is there anything I can help with? Or it's just a general sort of how's everyone getting on, because you know I might be struggling, or someone will say I'm struggling. And I sort of myself and somebody else is senior course rep for the course, so we're sort of regularly checking in. And I think it's helping the students to know that other students can help them, because a lot of the time you don't want to keep emailing and messaging your lecturers on Aula and stuff like that, because it might be something really simple like, oh, is this the right deadline, or does this count for so much of my grade, etc. So I think being able to sort of drop that in a group chat has really helped everyone. There's been cases as well where people have sort of said, I think I'm going to drop out, or I think I'm going to move to part-time, and we've sort of gone, if you think that's right for you, do it, but we think you can do it, and we've sort of tried to push people and motivate them to keep them going, which I think has been really helpful. But I guess the dynamics of my masters, it's a lot heavier content than it would be at my undergraduate. So the masters in psychology is classed as like a conversion course, in order to sort of go on to get British Psychological Society sort of accreditation and stuff. So it's basically an undergraduate degree condensed into 1 year. So last semester we had 5 modules. This semester we've got 5 modules, and then I've got my dissertation and another module next semester. So I think even more so than anything else, like the COVID pandemic and this masters has taught us all time management and sort of scheduling things in and making sure we're hitting deadlines, because we don't really have a choice not to, because of how much content we have, compared to, I guess, my undergraduate. We had 3 or 4 modules a semester at a push, really, and everything was a lot more spread out, I guess, not relaxed, but it was manageable even if you didn't have the best scheduling skills. So I think that's kind of challenged a lot of people, and that's the sort of thing that people have come into struggling with. And because it's a conversion course as well, everyone's coming from different backgrounds. So we've got sort of mature students, we've got fresh undergraduate students like me, people coming in that are sort of going part-time because they've got children. The pandemic, I guess, as well, has sort of changed a lot of people to part-time. As international students, I guess, that have even more so been, I guess, impacted by the pandemic, because either they've come over here and now they can't really go back home, and they're working sort of from home in England, which isn't really their home because they don't know many people here. Or you've got people that have had to fully be online because they can't fly over, things like that. And the different age groups and the different courses they came from, because you didn't need to do sort of a science undergraduate degree to get onto the masters. So you find that it's interesting because people seem to have their strengths and their weaknesses in so many different areas on the course. And I think that's why our sort of group chats and support networks we've sort of created are so important, And I think that's the one bit of advice I would give especially if you're starting a new course, I think, is sort of try and get in touch with as many people. You're not being annoying if you've got that fear of sort of messaging somebody and asking like, oh, are you starting this course in September? More than likely, they're probably thinking about messaging you as well. Start a group chat if you can. It doesn't have to be on WhatsApp. It can be on something like Teams or on Facebook or Twitter, stuff like that. You can sort of network however you see fit. I think it depends on, I guess, people's interests and stuff. But I find it so important because it's one of those things that you can turn to that support network first before you have to sort of reach out to anything more, I guess, serious and higher up. So I would definitely recommend that. We did a similar thing on my undergraduate degree as well. We made a Facebook group chat about a month before we started, and like a big group of us sort of met up before we went to our first lecture. And that sort of group of friends, I guess, sort of grew and developed together throughout the years. So I would definitely sort of recommend socialising, even if it's over virtual, I guess.
Yeah, keep that peer-to-peer support network there. It seems so key and fundamental. I think one last question I had for you, Charlotte, was just as you mentioned, your undergrad is quite different to your current course of studies. Was there anything that helped you personally, take that risk, take that plunge, build that confidence that you might be able to give to another student who might be coming to the finish of their undergrad, and their whole mentality of what they want to do has changed, and they might be a bit not afraid, but weighing up their options kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that helped you, push the boat out and say, you know what, it's a bit different, but I want to do it? And was there anything that helped you do that?
I think the main thing for me was recognizing that like we're all on our sort of separate journeys. You'll see people that will go straight into employment. You'll see people that might drop out of their degree and say uni's not for me. And I think for me it was just recognizing that like your degree doesn't have to be the start of anything. That it's just, you don't just have to go, okay, I've got an undergraduate degree, so I need to follow this journey into this career only, because an undergraduate degree equips you with so many different skills. Like sort of my confidence and interpersonal skills have developed so much since I did my undergraduate degree that I feel like I could have probably jumped into quite a lot of different areas and disciplines from it. And also I would recommend like just sitting down and weighing up your pros and cons of things, because sometimes you can think, oh, this is the only route for me. It makes sense. It means I'll be employed in a year's time. I've got to do this master's. Otherwise, if I do this one, then it's going to lead to this, and then I've got to pay out for this, and then I'll get a job. So I need to get an employment ASAP. And you don't. I think if you were looking at this from, say, 3 years ago, if they're looking at it from the perspective of them being in sixth form or college and they're applying for unis, they weren't limiting themselves then of what they could do, really. They were sort of going, okay, I'm interested in this area. I'm going to dive into this and do it for 3 years. So don't suddenly limit yourself now that you've got this degree behind you. It's not an obligation to stay studying. It's not an obligation to get a job. You can have a year out. You can go and post-COVID times, go and travel around, do whatever you want. And I think for me, I was always taught that across HLS. It was always, you don't have to do this and this and this. These aren't your set jobs and careers for life. It was, these are the skills that you're going to get taught. Like we had a lot of modules sort of across the breadth of my undergrad where we sort of learned about interview skills, CV skills, but also sort of the soft skills, I guess, that you develop as a sports science student, but also as an undergraduate student. We'd have employability come in and talk to us and stuff like that. So I think things like that is really important for me, because I don't think students should feel like they have to feel pressured because they're a student, because I know you have sort of the reputation that students sometimes get from family members that don't understand, or from the public, where it's like, oh, you're still here like sponging off the taxes and stuff, which isn't the case, because you'd rather do an extra couple of years now than be in a job for life that you're not excited to be in and not happy every day waking up. So for me, it's reaching out to anyone that sort of, that you can trust their opinions of, and not letting it be biased. So I made sure I spoke to staff across a variety of courses who come from different journeys. Some of them did masters, some did PhDs, some didn't, some went into practice. And hearing those experiences sort of helped me shape who I want to sort of lend my time to and who I want to develop to become, because I think sometimes you can get into a sort of a habit, I guess, of limiting yourself and thinking, okay, I can only do this undergraduate degree. I'm not good enough to do a master's. I'm not good enough to do a PhD. So you just have to keep pushing yourself, I guess, and reaching out across all of the faculties. I guess the employability and like the talent team are amazing. Obviously, I've only got my own experience from the HLS team, which have been amazing. They helped me get onto my placement year. They helped me sort of in my final year as well, pre-COVID, and I know they've been doing a lot of workshops and stuff, so I would definitely recommend talking to them, because it's a very unbiased point of view, and I think sometimes you need that, because I had quite a biased experience when I was coming to university from my teachers at school, because they sort of knew what I wanted to do and they had their own experiences, and I felt very influenced by that looking back. Whereas I think at Coventry, what's really great is, yeah, they would love you to stay on at Coventry, but if it's not the right route for you, they're not going to push you into staying and lure you into, like, I guess, a full sense of security. So I definitely recommend talking to everyone, talk to family, friends, and just look around, look on LinkedIn. I found that really useful, Twitter as well, and see what other people's journeys are, I guess.
That's beautiful. And I just love that sentiment. And I love the fact that you've changed sort of your career goals from your first year, and then, you know, setbacks, as you mentioned, not getting the PhD, but realizing, you know, there's another route, and it's a route that you're hopefully enjoying, is, you know, studying and doing more research. And I think definitely you sound like one of the people who've you know, tackled COVID with such a great mentality, given all its adversities, especially with HLS being such practical courses, that there is ways around it. And there, you know, I'm so glad to hear that. And you're the fourth student who we've interviewed who have sung high praises for the employability / the talent team. So that's fantastic to hear. Any last advice or anything you want to give to current undergrad students who are finishing off their degrees, or any student really?
I think just like the very cliche, don't give up, because you have come this far. Yeah, there's a global pandemic going on and you don't feel like you're in control of the situation, but if anything is to go by, you've come, even if you're in first year, you've already overcome barriers to get to university and to keep going. And you knew at the start that it wasn't going to be easy, but if you can get through all those years of school and college, etc., and get to university, then you can do this. And reach out for that support. Don't ever feel ashamed to apply for extensions or deferrals, because you're on your own separate journey. There's no point comparing yourself to others on your course, because you don't know what they're going through. You all have your own different milestones to hit. So to hit them, don't worry about whether somebody else is hitting them a week before you because you had an extension, or whether you might have to do an extra year at university because you're not ready to do those modules yet. That's fine, because at the end of the day, it's your journey. Nobody's going to come back in a year's time and be like, oh, you didn't do that coursework in time, that's it, you can't have this job. That's not going to happen. It's more so, how are you developing and how are you enjoying university? Because at the end of it's still about enjoyment, whether you can be here in person or not, whether you can socialise with your friends at the pub or not. University should still be enjoyable, and you should still feel like you're part of our community. And hopefully, I know HLS is sort of pushing for a lot of the community feel, and I think that has been improved a lot. And hopefully that's the case, I guess, across all faculties. But reach out to your lecturers if you're struggling, your personal tutor, course director, module leaders, people on your course, people who might have graduated that you knew previously. I know I found that quite helpful when I was in first year. I spoke to a lot of third years on my course through some of the research that I did, because they've got that experience. They might obviously tell you that like their life's very stressful and all this, but it is going to be, because everyone's life's stressful, minus the pandemic. So just keep pushing on, I guess, and don't give up.
Excellent. No, I love that. Although with that invitation, you may now receive a few messages from undergrad students. So
Yeah, I realised that as soon as I said it. I was like, oh, I'll just change my name. It's fine.
No problem.
I'll throw somebody else under the bus.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charlotte. It's been a pleasure. Good luck with the rest of your masters, and wish you luck on your PhD applications, unless you change your mind. But it's been
probably will know me. I'll do a physiotherapy degree.
Right. Thank you so much.
See you later.